All right, welcome everyone. It's another episode of Hot Takes. Today we're doing a closer look at self-image and basically what it means to see yourself on camera. Now, there's a reason why we're doing this today. So next week, I'm doing a masterclass on no means next opportunity. It's basically an hour where I'm going to share all of the mental resiliency tools that I use to stay motivated and keep pitching and pitching and pitching and pitching, whether you're pitching media or pitching business. Overcoming no is how you're going to make your future success. So I've shared the link in the comment section. Sign up. It's free. You're going to be transformed in that hour. The masterclass itself is going to talk about a lot of when we encounter no, when other people are giving us resistance. But a lot of times when it comes to showing up on social media, the no is actually something that we create for ourselves. And that comes in the form of self-image. And that alarming thing that happens when we see our image for the first time on camera. So whenever I talk about all things story, all things image, and all things confidence, I bring up my good friend, Tony Lombardo. Hi, friend. Hi. So before the chat, for the first time ever, we kind of shared notes of what we wanted to talk about. So I want to share with everyone a video. So there was in the storytelling world, sometimes a story and a piece of content just comes at you from on high. So just over a year ago, I was at a retreat in Mexico, and the whole theme was about overcoming fear. And on the last day, we took a trip to a cenote where everyone was jumping off this cliff and into the water. It looked like so much fun. I am terrified of heights, but I thought, well, what a beautiful ending to this retreat that is all about overcoming fear. Why don't I just use the tools that I learned from this retreat and try to overcome my fear of heights? So what happened was this video.
Fear is holding you back from something. Try doing that same thing, but from a lower platform. That small success will erase any fear or doubt you might have, so you can try again from the top.
So super quick, and basically it captured the trick that I used to overcome my fear of heights. I went to the highest fear, could not jump over the edge. My fear of heights just kept me firmly in place. So I went down to a lower ledge and jumped from there. And then I went to the middle edge, jumped from there. And by the time I went back to the top edge, there was no fear because I convinced myself that it's perfectly safe to jump from this edge. In the moment, I'm experiencing this in real time. I'm not paying attention to what everyone else is doing around me. So it was a beautiful gift when one of the organizers on the last day said, "Hey, Tara, I caught some of these videos of you jumping off the cliff." And I'm like, well, okay, this is a clear sign. I am now meant to share this piece of advice. I am now meant to share this experience with my followers because my content is all about overcoming fear. And yet when it came time to posting this video, I stopped. It was like I was at the top of the ledge again. I could not bring myself to share this video because I saw my body. I saw myself in a bathing suit and I just thought, oh, I can't do this. So I think that's what is the purpose behind today's conversation is sometimes you want to share this and what you share is going to be useful for someone, but you stop yourself dead in your tracks. And it really just comes down to image. And Tony, I'm sure you encounter this all the time with your clients.
All the time. If I had 5 cents for every time somebody told me they're not good on camera, I wouldn't have to take pictures. Yeah. But I'm so impressed that you got over this hump by yourself. Yeah. Because we're all our own worst enemies. You're your own worst enemy. It's so trite, but it's true. And the word I wanted to bring up in this whole conversation is encouragement. Mm-hmm. I'll share my story is as a plump little 9-10-year-old Tony with big fat glasses, like there was zero confidence in this kid at school, right? Mm. But then I had a funny grade 6 teacher who like joked around. And so then sometimes I would just like chirp and just throw out little things. And instead of getting in trouble, the poor man decided to encourage me and turned me into a monster, just like such a class clown. And I was like, oh my God, I'm funny. Yeah. I didn't know that about me until this teacher opened that up about me. And then that sort of projected out, that turned into a whole other splinter of my life of like, oh, I can use comedy and I can hide behind comedy. Right. And so that, led me to a career in comedy and like what I do and all this stuff that has to do with confidence and hilarity. Now, I have an 11-year-old who had just finished a Nintendo commercial. He did a Cadillac. Like, he is killing it. And he is Johnny Charisma. And all of my friends, especially my comedy friends, will say, well, he takes after you. I'm like, that age, not that.
Yeah.
So where does he get it from? And it took a lot of searching to realize it's the encouragement that I give in this household where being stupid and silly is a very big compliment.
Yeah.
And now it's totally ingrained in him from a very early age is like to speak up in a crowd and just, crack a joke. Like, if you've got the confidence, like, just go for it. And
yeah, which I think is an echo from the message you got from your teacher, right? Giving you permission to take up space and to have a voice. Like that's basically how I worked through whatever edge I was hitting in posting that video. It wasn't so much with that.
How you find that confidence in yourself, don't ask me. I have no idea. I'm really good at other people.
Yeah. Well, I'll share then basically more of the self-exploration. So when I was, looking at this video and having the conversation with myself, it wasn't so much, I connected to like the actual exercise from the video of like, you hit your fear and then you bring it down to a lower level. The other part of that exercise is being in conversation with yourself. So as I'm working through my fear of heights, I'm negotiating with myself. Okay, so the top height was scary. That's where I felt dangerous. Let's see what the lower height is all about. And when I was at the lower height, that was actually where the tour guide, who I only describe as sexy Jesus with a face tattoo, was like, hey, be careful over here. There's some rocks that you might want to avoid. And I thought, well, if sexy Jesus with a face tattoo is like, well, the lower level is the scary part. Like, what am I getting into? So I jumped in from the lowest level and actually scraped my leg against some rock. So by that point, I'm negotiating with this fear saying, okay, so the height actually isn't the issue. It's the proximity to the rocks. So when I was trying to get over this fear of what happens when I post this video and people see my full body in a bathing suit, it was that same exploration of, well, what is this fear trying to show me? Like, what specifically am I afraid of? And what came up was this idea that if I post this video, people are going to see that I gained weight in the pandemic. So then I started questioning, well, is that actually true? And the answer is no. People see me all the time. Seeing this video is not what they're going to see that I gained weight in the pandemic. The person who's seeing it for the first time is me. And that was when I realized, oh, these judgments are mine. I'm actually not worried about what people are going to think when they see this video. It's what I'm thinking. And I wish I could figure out how to share JPEGs. I can only share PDFs and videos on this platform, but there's an image, and maybe I'll share it on Instagram after this. There's a photo that I have taken about 7-8 years ago when I'm just about to cross the finish line of my first marathon. And I am fit, I am strong, I am powerful, and I am slender, like probably half the size of what I am in the TikTok video. That is what I see in my mind's eye even today. When I think of my body, I think, well, this is what it's shaped like. This is what it looks like, because that is what's imprinted in my mind. So when I see photos of what I look like now, there is always that disconnect of like, oh, well, that's not what I expect to see. But it's just that awareness that it's different. 8 years is a long time, perimenopause and a pandemic will do strange things to your body. And just being in conversation with, well, what judgments are coming up? Can I work towards acceptance? Can I just say, you know what? Okay, so my body is what it is. There's still another marathon in me. So, next year, my body is going to look different. And the year after that, it's going to look different, and just be accepting of that. So I think the first step is just being awareness of when these things come up, they're not the absolute truth. That initial reaction of when you see your image and you don't like what you see, that's not necessarily how other people are going to react to it. So it's just about getting curious and just really exploring, like, what am I actually afraid of? What am I actually feeling about this? And then once I neutralized how I felt about my image in this video, I realized, well, if I don't post this, what happens? And I started thinking of all the people who need to hear this message, who need to hear how to overcome fear and work through whatever is holding them back, and just how beautifully that aligns with the overall message of what I'm trying to create here. And similar to your hiding behind comedy, the story and the purpose behind the message became bigger than my own self-image. And that's where I found the courage to post it. And not only post it, it's pinned at the top of my TikTok account. I mention it in many speaking engagements because even the story about the fear and hitting that edge in posting it helps people who hear about this experience.
I will say the fact that you pinned it helps you to get used to it.
Yeah.
And the getting used to it is huge. And let's go back to 11-year-old Tony, who's started cracking jokes in class. Then we'll fast forward about 10 years where I'm like 21 and I'm going to try stand-up comedy. And it's so terrifying. And I'm like sucked at it. So then when I got home, I'm like, I have to practice, but I have to practice like holding something that's a mic. I have to practice when I was waiting tables at the time. I'm like, I have to practice like talking to people in this dynamic where I'm higher than they are. All of these things where I was like, I have to just get used to being on there. That's what changed everything, was practicing and getting used to that. So you getting used to that image of yourself that now it's just normalizes it, right? Because you're more used to it. That's why, you know, people that get a lot of photo shoots done, they just show up and they but then people who are apprehensive about it, they need some coaching and directing to pull that out of them. And it all comes down to energy, like just shooting that out. And so it's me pulling that out of people. And they always leave the photo shoot or saying like, oh my God, that was like so much fun. I'm like, I know, that's why I do this. It's so much fun. But I understand you don't do this every day, and it can be a daunting thing, but we're all our own worst enemies. Like,
where would you say most of the coaching happens in your work with clients? Is it in the act of getting photographed, or is it seeing the proofs as part of the photo shoot?
Let's back up. It's from even before booking. Like people will say to me, like I wish I could have a great headshot. I'm like, yes, you can. Let's go to the studio and do it. But people will say to me is, oh, I'm terrible at photos. I'm like, if there is a bad photo of you, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the photographer. It's not your fault. And when people hear that, it just alleviates so much pressure off of them. And just by giving it diffuses the entire thing. And people have often said like, wow, that's really encouraging to hear that. I'm like, but think about it. It has nothing to do with you. It really doesn't. These are all my choices. It's my choice to shoot you at this camera angle, at this focal length, use this lighting from this direction, to hit the shutter when you were breathing at that moment. Like they're all none of this is your decision. And I learned this from my directing prof at theater school. Is, you know, I said, well, if the play sucks, if the actors suck, because he said it's always the director's fault. And I said, yeah, but if the actors suck, and he's like, well, who casted the actor? It is always the director's fault. So in this case, if there's a bad photo of you, it's my fault because I didn't pull that out of you. I didn't pull that energy out of you. I didn't have enough wherewithal of how to do that, because a lot of it is just getting you to relax and shoot some energy at me so that I capture that. So my thing I like to say is, if you think you're bad at getting your photos, it's like saying you're bad at getting your hair cut. It's all about the person with the scissors. Either they're good or they're bad. Yeah. So that is in pre-booking, and then when it's time for the shoot, that helps them a lot. And then you because you're a coach, you understand like actionable things. And so there are actionable things that I can get you to do to give you that confidence, to let you breathe, to force you to breathe. And I texted you this as soon as I got home from my shoot on Thursday, is she's a breathing specialist.
Yeah.
And 2 frames shot, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, that is better than most people's headshot after 90 minutes. If we just went home now, you would be like awesome. And I said, and I said, you're just really good at breathing. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, it hit me so hard how important breathing is for giving that energy. And breathing specialist, of course she's good at breathing. And I was like, wow, breathing is what this is all about. So a lot of giving that energy out and having that space, like fill the space with this energy. I often will like, all right, I'll just fill the space with like, hello, and like fill the space with your voice. Even though I'm shooting photos, like it makes a huge difference in the still photo.
Yeah, it does. And I always have like it's almost like a spiritual understanding of being captured in photo or in video. Like the fact that breathing was so powerful for this client of yours, of course, because it calms down your energy. The camera can only the camera captures what you're bringing to the table, and of course, the technical side is capturing it too. So both the photographer and subject need to be present and creating the same moment. But yeah, if you're distracted, if you're in your head and not in your body, that's going to show up energetically in your face. It's going to show up in all the different things. I'm thinking back to when we did the on-camera confidence workshop together, and you were packing up and you're like, hey, Tara, and you snap some photos. Not my best work because I couldn't. As you're taking pictures, I'm like, well, what's my story? Like, what's my purpose? What am I doing here? Like, what's happening? And I could see that in the photos. I'm like, yeah, technically the lighting is fine. The framing is fine. I'm posed the way that Tony told me to frame, but in my face, I'm like, no, I'm not present. I'm not committed to this moment, which I think is the commitment and confidence run hand in hand.
Admittedly, I did grab you from out of the blue. So yeah.
You did.
Yeah, you were not. But again,
my first. But it came back down to like the reason why I couldn't be centered though is because I didn't have a purpose. Like it was so spontaneous. It was spontaneous, but then posed. And because we spent so much time talking about story, I'm like, well, what is the story that I'm telling here? And there was nothing. It was a completely blank slate, and that showed up in the photos.
Something that I will die on this hill is that, and you've agreed the same sentiment, is people are way more interesting than they give themselves credit for.
Absolutely.
And I'm coming off of, I just showed you a bunch of videos, little short films on accountants. Like they're not boring people. Like there are a number of people, but like they all have interests and they have a vibrancy to them. It's just a matter of giving them the space to let them have fill the studio with who are you and give me that, right? So somehow you have to bring it into yourself. Like if you're on your own on this, is like, wait a minute, I probably know something that no one else does about this thing that I'm an expert at. So I should give myself the permission to fill this space with this thing I'm going to say. And that a lot of confidence can come out of that. I had the same experience with earlier on in my photography. Is I never like to hey, can I just get you to move your chin this way? Or I never posed people. Yeah. But afterwards, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, I just wish it was like that and that or whatever. And so there was a photographer that I looked up to, and he said we have to give ourselves permission to get involved and move things because we know we're working in their best interest. And so that changed everything. Where then I got really involved. Like no, instead of like just move your arm this way, move your arm this, and just like posing it like a lot, and then breaking out of the perfect, but starting with a perfect mold and then flicking it. That became sort of my signature way of getting people. And I had to give myself permission, like you said, to get involved and change things and move things. Because at the end,
interesting how It's interesting how much like permission keeps coming up in this conversation. Like, again, for people who have been watching us for a while, we don't prepare our material. This is entirely made up. And we've done very little time talking about like the technical side of things, so like lighting, camera positions, all of that stuff is available on the internet. If you want to figure out how to set up a good looking shot for at home, you know how to do this. But that's not the same as being confident and showing up fully. It is about either someone giving you permission, someone giving you space to take up, or you giving yourself permission and staking a claim and saying, I have something interesting to say in this space, so I'm going to take up this space. We take up space on our platforms on Tuesdays for Hot Take Tuesdays. We carved this out. We made this commitment, and then we show up. And that really is the secret formula of having confidence on camera.
There was a guy that wrote a bunch of books, all right? And he was telling me, he goes, I've never written books before, but they were like how-tos on certain things. And he was people to write books. And he's like, and your biggest obstacle is going to be like, well, what do I have to say about this topic? Yep. And he's like, just think, all you have to do is write a book that will help somebody where you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's enough. Because in grade 1, you don't learn calculus. You just learn enough to get to grade 2. Eventually, that person will get to the point where they've exceeded what you know, and they'll hire whatever. But you have things to say that will help someone that was you a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's awesome. I think that's, there are people that ask me silly camera questions, and it's like, well, that's like white belt stuff. But yes, that's where you're at. That's white belt stuff. So
yes. I love that advice that he gave too, that it's just think of advice that you needed 5 years ago and just tell that story. I actually just this afternoon gave some quick coaching with a client of mine. She's an addictions and recovery specialist. She has an idea. She's like, well, I want to do like a scorecard, I think was her idea. And so she's tossing ideas back and forth. And she's like, well, what do you think I should do? And I was like, think back to when you were first at the beginning of your journey in your addictions recovery. What information would you have responded to? What information did you need at that point in time? And then she was like, oh, and then went off on that direction. Sometimes it's turning outward. This is where I'm going to rail against market research. You can research yourself to death. You can research yourself to inactivity. But when you're looking to share your specialized knowledge, just look back at your past. Like, what problem did I deal with 5-10 years ago? What advice would I want to have heard then? And then share that. It can be as simple as that. You know, my client avatar is me. It is a business owner who is dealing with the same things that I'm dealing with. And so it's as simple as that. And people who are going through those same problems, they have their specifics. They have their nuanced challenges, and they're still coming to me and finding me and looking to me to work with them. I don't have to do a ton of research to create content. I just share, well, this is what I experienced and this is how I work through it. Yeah.
Yeah. And because as much as you want to doubt your own confidence, there's people that look up to you. Remember that. And it doesn't, this is the craziest thing that happened to me this year is I've always wanted to be a great illustrator, but I suck at it. And I put some things on paper and blah, 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 and they were online somewhere. And then somebody saw them and wanted to hire me to create their, like, hand draw them something for their workshops that they do. They want like a little border thing. And I was like, my first answer was, but I'm not an illustrator. But I'm like, wait a minute. To him, I am an illustrator. And that's all that needs to happen is that I don't need to tell myself about these illustrations. And then I was doing it and my kids thought it was awesome. My wife thought they were awesome. And I'm like, so I'm getting the encouragement that I can do this as much as I doubted me like crazy that I could never do it. So the other thing I learned too is that you can hide behind style. It's like, I don't do photorealistic drawings because I can't, but I have this style that's just really bold, black and white, no shading kind of thing. I'm like, that's how I draw. If that's what you want, that's what I will create for you. Now, mind you, in photography, where I am very schooled, I can create any style I want, but I choose this one in particular. It's like I beef with these younger photographers that are like, oh, I'm a natural light photographer. It's like, you're a natural light photographer because you don't understand flash. That's a whole other problem. You need to, you can't swim, but you're going to jump in a pool. Like, it's just, so you can niche in and just target those people and just be like, this is what I talk about. I only talk about these aspects of this industry, and I'm an expert at that. And so, but I think a lot can be done with a coach that can give you actionable pieces of information, actionable things to do that will give you that. But it really does come down, just understand you are way more interesting than you give yourself credit for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you just explained with your illustration anecdote too is actually something that I encourage with myself and with other people, is to just get curious. We tend to, see ourselves like, I am this silo. This is my expertise. This is what I do. This is, my brand story. There are no other chapters or versions of this. But especially when you're a creative person, especially when you're an entrepreneur, there's always these other things that keep popping up that pique your curiosity. So illustration piqued your curiosity. You weren't the best, but you're good enough to suit someone's needs and get hired for that. So that's to me, curiosity is another pathway to confidence. You don't have to be the best, but just, I'm really interested in this. So let's do how this podcast started. Of you're just like, well, let's just jam and see where it turns to. And now it's a podcast.
So I wanted to bring you up in a story that I had last Friday with somebody who she saw those videos I did on the accountants. And she's like, I couldn't stop looking at them. I'm like, I know. And they're accountants. She goes, but how do you pull this story out of people? And I'm like, but I said, my friend Tara McEwen said to me, my superpower is curiosity. And I just always thought it was my own ignorance of things. But I'm like, no, I like that. I like the way you said it better. But it's true. It's like, oh, you play on a ball hockey team? What's that like? I don't do that. And just finding things to ask questions about is just, I'm just naturally curious about things. Okay, granted. So it's in all of that I'm finding all this fodder to tell the story. Then when you put together the final piece, it's like, wow, this person's so interesting. So I forget where I was going with that, but I remember a friend of mine, his son was in journalism class and he wanted to interview me. And so he interviewed me and about my career in comedy, my career in graphic design and photography and filmmaking, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of it, I said, why'd you ask me? And he goes, because you've done so many interesting things. I'm like, yeah, but stories are everywhere. It's you, the storyteller. It's up to you. Like, that guy on the side of the road, like begging for change. What is his story? There's a story there. Or the guy over there who's opening up a donut shop. What's that story? There's stories everywhere. You just have to be curious enough to find them. And so it's impossible for us to find them in ourselves. It's very hard, I would say. So I don't know. People can, but it's a matter of the eyes looking out. They're not designed to look in. You need someone else to show that to you. And I said to her, I'm like, Tara does that for me. There are parts of, I can't tell my story, but there are times where you tell me things. I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to explore that because you saw it in me, because it's impossible for me to see it in me.
Well, and that's why, like, these conversations, I don't know if you've noticed, this is now my social strategy. I used to film, I used to bulk film a bunch of tips in my living room window because that's where I get the good lighting. But I found that these conversations, we're able to uncover some really, really interesting, innovative, and deep material in conversation. I'm never going to uncover, if I were to do a tip series on feeling more confident on camera, I would probably fall to the default of, find the good lighting and set up a good background and tie your hair back because you need a haircut. It would have been like the typical stuff, but it's in conversation. Again, it's this curious exploration, permission, giving yourself and having someone give you permission to take up space, I think is one part of it. Getting curious about your subject matter and what you want to share and express, that's another big one. Like, that's just allowing whatever message is trying to come in and through you that's, this version of hiding behind comedy. That's this version of, the story about overcoming fear is bigger than my vanity. It's just getting curious about, well, here, what do we want to talk about? And letting that get bigger than, the initial fears and nervousness about showing up on TV or on screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we are our own worst enemies. There's a very famous Peter Hurley is a headshot photographer in New York City. And one of his famous stories that I love is I had this woman, she was coming in, can't wait to shoot her, bang, 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 great shots. Then me, her, and him and the husband and the woman are going through the shots. It's like, oh, my nose, oh, my chin, nah, nah, nah. Mm-hmm. And he says to the class, he's like, guys, this was Miss America I was shooting. Like, so America hates how she looks. What hope in hell do the rest of us have? And it's another diffusing tactic. It's very diffusing for people to say, like, wow, like it doesn't matter what you think of yourself, it's what other people think. That's how Miss America got there, is because what other people thought, Yeah. So say the guy hiring me as an illustrator, it doesn't matter what I think of me. It matters what, which is an intuitive way to live, but it's true, is other people are going to tell you what it is. That's Seinfeld too, is he goes, you know what it is? Like, I have studied the craft of comedy for decades, and the only people that are going to tell me that I did it right is an audience of people who have no idea how to do it. Well, I can't write jokes to tell you if it's funny or not.
Yeah. I like this. We've gone deep. So in our last little bit, because of course we always go over time. So if someone were watching this right now and they're feeling a little subconscious, they're feeling like they don't look good on camera, what is one thing you can tell them to break out of that?
If I can be honest, is you just need a great photographer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's it. Because even if I took a selfie of myself, you know how much it sucks? Because I'm too busy thinking about the other parts of it. It's like you need that coach. I've snowboarded for almost 30 years. I took my first lesson 6 years ago. And I had a coach, and I was like, what am I going to learn? And I had to unlearn things. He's like, you've picked up some bad habits. And he just taught me some actionable things, like keep your belly button over the middle of the board. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. Your front leg is like a joystick. I'm like, oh, okay. Actionable things that I would have never, ever, ever come up with on my own. But I needed that coach. And the ramp of my snowboarding in like my 20th year went like skyrocketing and demystified so much of it. I think it's the same way with your own image in 2 dimensions. And it's like when people say to me, it's like, oh, I'd love to do a video, but I don't have anything to say. You don't have anything to say because you don't have a great writer. I was like, oh, I'm terrible on camera. I was like, you're terrible on camera because you don't have a great director. And I'm not an accountant to be those things. It's like, you're not going to ask me to do bookkeeping. So we need each other.
Yeah. And I think too, what you nailed on as well is if we're inside our heads, if we're critical of our image, if we're telling ourselves, we're not a good illustrator, we don't have anything to say, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're turning too much inward, so you're leading with ego. How can I make myself feel good about being in this space? Whereas if you turn outward and think of the person you're trying to speak to, right? Who is this message for? Why do they need to hear this? Once you take that your thoughts and your energy into that direction, changes everything. Because now the focus isn't on you. You're not looking for attention. You're looking to share information. Yeah. The distinction I make with clients is that are you creating content where it's look at me or learn from me? If you want to create content where it's learn from me, then we're talking. If it's look at me, I don't do that. Yeah. Okay.
But in either case, both of those are giving, I would argue. Yeah, and that's the secret to it all, is just know that you have something that no one else, you know something that you 5 years ago didn't know. You can take that and project that out, and it's all that energy coming out. Even
absolutely,
just as we're talking here, it's like we're giving that energy. So but you might need a coach to get you through it, and I probably think you do. That's the
I know
truth.
one.
Yeah. Yeah, a coach in the business and a director for you on camera. Like
Yeah.
we're all doing the same job of giving you
Yeah.
actionable things to get you to be that level. And then with practice, you will be able to pull it off on your own
Absolutely. Yeah.
and get
And
encouraged.
of course, if you do want tips on lighting, we can provide that too. But that's not what we're excited about today.
No,
Oh, well, Tony, this was a delight, a treat. I never know where these conversations are going to go, but I'm always pleased with where we end.
I love it. Thank you so
All right.
much, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.